Okay, that is posted in all of the places. Okay, so I think that's now actually showing the camera. This is the first time I have attempted to that's the wrong way. That's too far that way. Okay, I think that's there. Just need to get the chat up. All right. So, hello and welcome to the Shearwood Games model making stream, where today we are going to be building a ship from the game's other starter faction. The last two streams, 2 weeks, ended 2 weeks ago, were primarily focused around building and painting this. The other starter faction, the Independent Planet Protection Pact, have a very different aesthetic, and you can see the render of the ship that we are about to be building down in the bottom right hand corner. Whilst I'm doing this, I'm also going to be talking a little bit about the plans for what's going to happen over the next couple of weeks and months, both regarding the game and also, if you've been following me on Twitter or Facebook, you'll have noticed, or you'll have seen my announcement, hopefully, that I now have my very own laser cutter, which means that my MDF scenery lines, which I used to sell under my old name of Aether Firma, will be coming back, and so I'll be talking a little bit more about that later. So, first things first though, let's talk a little bit about the ship that we're going to be building. These are parts that are basically straight off the printer. They're kind of, well, so there's going to be a little bit of clean up before we can start actually assembling it proper. And as usual, the final production ones of these, I will be using a drill to drill a hole in the bottom to mount it onto the base. The actual final production ones will have a hole precast into them. And so whilst the cleanup that I'll be doing on these here isn't exactly what you would do at home with your own ships, hopefully, well, it won't be any worse. You'll have to remove some gates and maybe do a little bit of mold line cleanup. Nothing too terrible, but you can see, like on these little missile launchers, as they come off the 3D printer, they've got these little sort of branch-like support structures, which I've already removed from these parts. But as you can see, there's not a huge number of parts here. You've got two parts for the engine at the back, which then attaches onto what I've been calling the core, which then attaches onto the cockpit, and you can very quickly see how that sort of goes together. This ship, as you can see here, whereas the UNM very much favour missile launchers and other guided weapons, the IP3 very much favour the railgun. And so the kit will come with 4 railguns, but also 2 missile launchers. So I'll probably, when we get a little closer, ask to see what you lot think. So first things first, I'm just going to file down some of the little nubs that attach, which is where the support structures attach to the model, just using a flat file. I am also going to be running a competition in the near future again to win a ship of your very own. One of the advantages of this kind of 3D printing is that there's generally very little cleanup required, and if you can get the design of the part right, where you won't have a huge amount of, or where you can minimize your overhangs, you can very quickly go from, well, you can heavily reduce the amount of support structure required. And just to kind of repeat, this is not the kind of cleanup you'll have to do on actual sort of production ships. I mean, giving the attachment surfaces a light file will probably always be just a good idea, just to give the glue a little something else to key onto. But the surface quality as they come off the printer is already pretty good, and then that's the ones that become masters we then put just a little bit more care and attention into. Just to remove any sort of extra little bits of surface imperfections. But you can see how there, with very little effort, those parts just go together. Because this is the latest in a long line of prototypes, and one of the things that I've added here that previous iterations haven't had is a much greater degree of sort of keys and slots for parts to go into. But I think I've made the keys, well, I know that I've made the keys too large here, so the next iteration will have smaller keys. And apologies if you can hear that noise, that is a helicopter. Goodness knows why there is a helicopter over a Nottingham suburb at 7 o'clock in the evening. And then again on this cockpit piece, just a tiny light sanding to remove some on a visible part. And then just sanding down this contact section, and you can see how one sort of neatly slots over the other, but you can also see how they're just a little bit too big, but that's fine. On this prototype I can just that is the one problem. There is a certain degree of expansion from CAD file to part, and if you buy a very expensive printer with a very expensive software, there is a degree to which the software can compensate. It can make everything smaller so it comes out of the printer at the right size. But we're talking about very expensive software, probably out of reach of most individuals. And so it's just really a mixture of intuition and trial and error. Though I have seen one of the reasons why this might be the case. I put supports inside the slot where one of the keys goes. Ha, there. So now I can just press it all together and you can start to see how it all fits together. And just like that, we've got ourselves a spaceship. So the next thing I need to do is just drill a hole in what's going to become the bottom and there's just some support lugs. So I've just filed off. You could use a Dremel. In fact, there is a Dremel right behind me, but they're loud and it's in its box. And in theory, this is a sharp drill bit. but this is also quite hard resin. It's probably quite harder than the actual resin that will get used in the production models. So whilst I'm drilling, it's probably a good opportunity to take a moment to talk about scenery and laser cutters. So, some of you may remember that once upon a time I sold laser cut MGF scenery, and it was pretty well received by the people who bought it. But I had the problem that I didn't own a laser cutter. I was renting time on the laser cutter at the London Hackspace when it was in Hackney. And before anyone makes the joke, believe me, that we were aware. I'm not making any progress with this drill bit. Is it blunt? Is it one of these? And so I had like this sort of twin problem that on the one hand, I couldn't justify I couldn't do much advertising because I didn't own my own laser cutter, and so I couldn't ever I couldn't make guarantees about ever being able to fulfill a given order. But at the same time, without being able to get the sort of depth of the order book, I couldn't justify buying a laser cutter, and then I was still living in London, and so it was also the parallel problem of how do you where did I put it? I lived in a tiny flat. Whereas I was now that I live in Nottingham, I've been very lucky and I managed to pick up one from someone locally, second hand. Going nowhere. Bringing out the big guns. Actually, I might already have the right size drill bit. Yep. When in doubt, apply power tools. I do actually have the drill press for this. So, with the hole drilled, I might just drill a little. not even really just a hole, a little notch on the other. So the real part won't be hollow either. That's just something to make it easier to print. So this being resin, and this is something that won't change for the final part, you'll want to assemble it using super glue. So we just place a dab of super glue on the top there, and then making sure to get it the right way round. Just press the part on. And wait for the glue to set. And then the same goes for the rear section. Apply a dab of glue. And then hold together until the glue sets. And then for the final section, once again we just apply a little bit of glue to the part. And we wait for the glue to set. So our next task is just to clip off these rail guns. Decided that because the last ship was all missile launchers, this one can be all rail guns. So we just, so again, the cleanup, there's just a little bit of cleanup to do on these parts, but the actual real parts will have a slightly different cleanup procedure, but it won't be anything super difficult. Just clip them off. For these, it'll just be a case of clip them off the sprue. And maybe give them a little bit of a tidy up. Whilst the starter set and the sort of initial packs will just contain these weapons, do have plans for providing additional weapons in sort of upgrade packs. Which will help you make new ships. Alright, so the glue has set there, so if I just stick In hindsight, I probably should have stuck the drill hole a little further back, but hey ho, it's a demonstration model. What we're going to do is just to apply the tiniest dab of glue to the weapon's mount point. And we're just going to glue one of the railguns in place. And then we rinse and repeat on the other side. Doesn't take a huge amount of glue. And then also on the forward hard point. So this forward one doesn't and there, in just under 30 minutes, granted that's been doing some cleanup that you as a customer wouldn't have to do, we've assembled a spaceship. So in just a moment I will get to, well, we will start painting it. So hopefully you can already start to see, if I just turn it the other way and maybe sort of try and angle it like the one in the picture, but you can start to see the ship. So our next task is going to be to prime it. Just get rid of some of that dust, those missile launchers. So unlike the ship that we did last time, this one will come in packs of 2. And I'm going to prime it with Stynylres Grey Primer. Which is a polyurethane primer. I quite like it. And it being a nice neutral grey means that you can paint basically whatever colour scheme on top of it you want to. I'm going to be painting this in effectively the box art scheme, so dark grey with a red stripe. And it's a good thing this is a prototype because there's a part missing. Now I need to investigate why. But I think I know why. If you're wondering why everyone's favourite tool, Mr. Heat Gun, is not making an appearance, Mr. Heat Gun unfortunately tried to catch fire. And so Mr. Heat Gun 2 is in the post. And so now I've just got to let that primer coat dry and we can get started with the rest of it. Although the lack of Mr. Heat Gun means that is going to take a little bit longer than usual. And so I might just go to the intermission now that I also know how to make that work. Just whilst I clean the airbrush. Alright, I'll be back in about 5 minutes. Probably set up a bunch of these. So, apologies, due to minor technical problems, namely that the light in my workshop just went, and it's going to be a good 20 minutes for me to try and fix this. I should probably wait until the morning when I'll actually have daylight in here to do it. I'm afraid I'm going to have to cut this one short. But thank you very much to everyone who joined in, and I will see you in a week's time, this time next week, so Thursday 1900 BST, to finish painting this, and if everything goes to plan, I will have two of its little friends to paint, and I will show you how you can quickly and easily paint it without the airbrush, because last time was very masking heavy, so this time we're just going to paint it by hand with paintbrushes. Thank you very much, and see you next time.